This is Black and White Makes Gray, a memoir of an interracial childhood by Judith Davidson. Chapter 9. I've taken a job as a waitress at a restaurant owned by a friend of Evan's. It's just to tide us over for now, my mother said as I perused the refrigerator for a snack after school. I wasn't all that surprised. I'd been half expecting an announcement like this. With her separation from my father, my mother had gotten what she wanted, the right to start a new life with a new partner, but it had come with a financial cost. I knew my father was paying child support for the four of us, but I did not know much more about my mother's financial status. I had the feeling our situation was somewhat dire. As far as I'd known, though, my mother had never worked a real job with a paycheck before, although she'd worked very hard as a volunteer. "What restaurant? Where is it?" I asked. "It's called Paul's, on the corner of Williams and Russell in North Portland." "Williams and Russell," I said, staring at her in horror. "That's the worst corner in town." I closed the refrigerator door slowly, no longer hungry. My mother had driven us down Williams, and we knew the bleak corner where junkies and prostitutes often stood, lonely and looking for something to happen. When we passed by there, Mom had told us it hadn't always been like this. She said this corner used to be at the heart of Portland's Black community, a vibrant business district and a place filled with music. That was before urban renewal had cut it down. Looking at that sad corner, it was hard to believe it had once been a wonderful place. Now she was going to work at one of the only surviving enterprises, Paul's Cafe. "Mom," I wailed at her in frustration, "it's owned by a friend of Evan's, so I can start working right away." I didn't have many choices, she shrugged, and her eyes were hooded, not meeting mine. "When are you starting?" "Tonight. I'll be working the evening shift. Hopefully there will be some tips. You will have to feed your brother and sisters. There is some lettuce in the refrigerator. You can make a salad. See if Evan has some money. You can get a frozen pizza. Make sure Virginia gets fed." "When will you get home?" "About 11, I think." Before I could protest, she left the room and headed out the front door, car keys in hand and her purse bumping against her hip. In the front corner, Mr. Porter thumped out chords on the piano. Immediately, I thought, Dad cannot know Mom is working at a cafe on the corner of Williams and Russell. I don't know what I thought would happen, but I knew it had to be kept secret. The next morning, as I was getting ready for school, I stood outside the door of my mother's bedroom and said loudly, "Mom, I need lunch money. Can I get some change from your purse?" Mr. Porter stepped out of the bedroom, shutting the door quietly behind him. "Your mother is trying to get some sleep. Go ahead, get the change you need," he said in a low voice. Mom's purse was sitting on the table near the bedroom door. I pulled it toward me and immediately noticed how heavy it was. This morning, her change purse was bursting with coins. "Wow," I thought, "is this from waitressing?" "Randy, look at this," I called him over. We ran our fingers through the deep piles of pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters, marveling at the feeling of coins like a living stream of money. We looked at each other, smiling gladly over what we saw as a large amount of money, and thinking this waitressing job might not be so bad. Coins, however, were not the only thing I found in Mom's purse. A few weeks later, as I picked it up to look for lunch money, it felt even heavier than usual. In fact, the bag still felt weighed down even after I pulled out the heavy change purse. I dug my hand in deeper and pulled out the hidden object at the bottom. "Be careful," my mother said sharply, emerging from her bedroom, a raggedy bathrobe pulled around her shoulders. I looked down to discover I was clutching a small silverish-colored pistol in my hand. I thought I would faint. "Put it back." "How did you get a gun?" I asked her, gasping for breath. "Evan got it for me." "Why?" "It's dangerous over there." "What do you mean?" "Things happen on the street. One night last week, a guy was staggering around in the street, holding his hands over his stomach. He dropped his hands when he fell and his intestines spilled out. He'd been knifed." "Mom!" "I need this job. We need the money." "But what if something happens to you?" "I have the gun." "You don't know how to use a gun." "It's a deterrent." I went back upstairs to finish getting ready for school. I was angry and scared. I didn't like my mother having a gun. I was terrified something could happen to her. Again, I wondered what my father would think if he knew where she was working and that she was carrying a gun to work. Would he try and take us away from her? What if Randy, Janet, or Virginia mentioned it to him? Would they know how important it was not to tell anyone about this? There was also another feeling bothering me, and it was the way she told me the story about the man who was knifed. I knew my mother needed money, but it had also been my suspicion that she craved dangerous experiences, like carrying a gun in your purse, or seeing a man who had been knifed stagger in the street and spill his guts out, so that she could put them in her stories and be a real writer, like her bedside reading, the novels of Henry Miller and Lawrence Durrell. In conversation with Bill, the two liked to brag about the daring things they did that were not like them, meaning the middle class. I wondered if working at Paul's Cafe fell into the not like them category. Eventually, Mr. Porter, who had himself never learned to drive, began to take the bus across town to meet Mom as she got off work at 11 p.m., and then would walk her the 1 block or so to wherever it was she had parked her car. Then she would drive them both home. I didn't know what to expect for my first Christmas as a child of divorced parents. And although that bothered me, I felt I shouldn't ask. Would we see our father? Would we see our grandparents? We usually had my mother's mother for Christmas Eve and then visited with my father's parents for Christmas. But how would we do it this year? Would we even have a tree? And if we did, would we have the same ornaments? How would I feel about seeing the ornaments I knew so well from my past in this house that didn't feel like home yet? One of my biggest concerns, however, was about the sleigh bell ceremony. Who would play Santa? "You want me to do what?" Mr. Porter asked in disbelief. "Shh!" we hissed at him, clustering around him in the tall front hall of the old house. "Quiet! They'll hear you and think something's up," my mother warned him. "It's really very simple." He rolled his eyes at her and winced. "We do it every year," she said. "You're kidding," he grimaced. "No, we're not," said Randy and I in unison. "Just take the bells and go outside, and when you get around the side of the house where you can't be seen from upstairs, you shake the bells hard and say in a loud, deep voice, 'Ho, ho, ho, Merry Christmas.'" "Why don't you do it?" he squeaked back at her. "My voice isn't deep enough, and they would know in a minute it was me. It has to be you." The three of us, Mom, myself, and Randy, were doubling over in silent, painful laughter at Mr. Porter's genuine surprise. Up until now, the Christmas Eve family custom of ringing the sleigh bells and pretending Santa was flying by had seemed perfectly sane. Doesn't everyone do something like this? This was the first time we'd viewed it through outside eyes. Suddenly, it did seem odd, but that made it even better. Mr. Porter shook his head as Mom carefully handed him the strap of bells, making sure they didn't jingle and alert Janet and Virginia upstairs. Carefully, he opened the front door and then gingerly walked across the porch and down the steps, turning left into the dense, weedy foliage along the side of the house. Some minutes passed, and we were almost beginning to think he might not be seen again. Then we heard it, faintly and then louder. The jingle-jangle of the sleigh bells coming towards the house. Louder and louder, and then, "Ho, ho, ho, Merry Christmas! Ho, 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 Merry Christmas!" And then the bells began to get softer, and at the very last we heard, "And to all a good night." Janet and Virginia began to scream from above, "Mom! Mom! It's Santa! Santa flew by!" Randy and I said, "Where? Show us!" They pointed toward Janet's window, dark and filled by the outline of the house next door. It was out there. I hoped Mr. Porter would sneak inside in the interval. "Did you see anything?" we asked. "No, but it was real. We could hear him," said Janet. "That's good," Randy explained. "He's starting to make his rounds. We need to leave him something for his reindeer, maybe some carrots and a note. Put it by the fireplace so Santa can see it when he comes down the chimney with his presents. Let's go to the kitchen and get the carrots and a plate to put them on." They ran ahead of him down the back stairs. Randy winked dramatically at me as he followed them out of the room. I went to the head of the front stairs. Mr. Porter had re-entered and the bells had disappeared. I gave him the thumbs up and headed to the back stairs to join the others. Note to Evan. Evan, this was a pivotal moment. Did you know that? It was the first time I can remember that you slipped out of the role you started with, in my mind, penniless black jazz musician, and into the role of father of us all. I didn't know where this would take us, but I knew something had changed in all of us. As I went down the back stairs, my hands tracing a line along the molding that topped the beading board, I wondered if my dad was missing us tonight. We would see him tomorrow when he and Louise picked us up to go to his parents for Christmas dinner, and I wondered if he would ask us about the sleigh bells. I wasn't sure what I should tell him. It was around 11 a.m. on Christmas morning when Dad drove up to the house with Louise in the car beside him. This was the second time they had come down to Portland together to see us since my parents' separation. And I was still waiting and watching, trying to learn more about her. I didn't think this was just because I was loyal to Mom. I needed more time to make up my mind. When they rang the bell, Virginia ran to open the door. "Come in," called Mom, motioning them into the living room. "Judy, Randy, Janet," she yelled up the stairs. "Your dad is here. Come on down." "Are you ready to go?" Dad asked as the four of us assembled in the front hallway. "Oh, wait," said Mom. And from the table in the living room, she grabbed the presents she had selected for us to give Dad, Louise, and our grandparents. We had just signed the cards. Now, Randy, Janet, and I each took the packages and cards, and as Virginia trailed behind us, we headed out the door behind Dad, climbing into the car for the ride to Newburgh. "Judy, how's school going?" Dad asked once we were underway. "Fine," I answered from the back seat. "Randy, did you get something special for Christmas?" Louise prodded him from her place in the front seat next to Dad. "Legos. You guys should tell Louise about the Gagas," said Dad. "No, Dad, not now," I steered him away. I wasn't sure if I wanted Louise to know everything about us yet, especially the intimate information, like Gagas. Janet spoke up. "They're dinosaur bugs." Louise's eyebrows went up with surprise. "It's a long story," I said. "It's a car game we used to play." Changing the subject, I asked, "Is Grandma making turkey today?" I knew my grandfather liked ham, but I much preferred turkey. "Yes, she is making turkey, and she said she made 2 kinds of pie." Randy and I traded looks. Her pie was the best. She once told me the trick to her pie crust was lard and a little bit of white vinegar. Whatever it was, she made the best pie imaginable. Soon we were beyond the Portland suburbs and traveling across the farm country of the next county. Newburgh, McMinnville, Wilsonville, these were towns in the middle of nut country, where orchards of walnuts and filberts abounded. We knew we were getting close to Newburgh when we saw the rich black dirt of the onion fields of Tualatin. As soon as we drove up in front of the small ranch-style house, my grandmother opened the front door, releasing all the wonderful smells from the kitchen. Mitzi, their little rat terrier, ran around in circles, insane with excitement. Come in, called Grandma, welcoming us. Randy, Janet, and I placed the presents for them under their little tree on a table in front of the front window, while Virginia plunked herself down in Grandpa's lap. I followed Grandma to the kitchen to look at the pies, pumpkin, and a berry pie. Oh, I was so glad the second pie wasn't mincemeat. I loved berry pie, and the area my grandparents lived in produced every kind of berry imaginable. Dinner was scheduled for 1 p.m., so we had time to open our presents before the meal. My grandparents had their presents for us under their small tree, and we shared the presents we'd brought for them. Grandma and Grandpa oohed and awed, praising our handwriting on the cards. Dad thanked us for his tie, and Louise thanked us for a set of coasters. Grandma had knitted each of us a pair of slippers, and Grandpa had cut foot-shaped pieces of inner tube from a car tire to make the sole of each slipper. These are our favorite kind of slippers, said Janet, and we quickly scraped off our shoes and changed into the slippers with the round pom-poms in the front. Then Dad went back to the car to get the presents he had brought, and we waited eagerly for him to distribute them. Pop, here's something for you, my father said, handing the first package over to his father. I looked at the package and was pretty sure it was socks or suspenders. Suspenders were always a good choice for my grandfather, a man who even had suspenders for his socks. Randy, this one's for you. Thanks, said Randy, grabbing his square package. Then Janet, Virginia, and Grandma got presents. Finally, Dad came to me, but I noticed there were no more presents. I wondered if mine were something extra big that would have to be specially delivered. Standing in front of me and seeming to speak for my benefit as well as the benefit of my grandparents and siblings, my father said, Judy, you don't have a present right now. I have it, but I am not giving it to you. He stopped to let his words sink in. I want you to remember what you've done and why this is happening to you. I looked at him in shock. What could I have done? No one had said anything to me. Everyone was silent, and I assumed my grandparents and my brother and sisters were also in shock. Nothing like this had ever occurred at a Christmas in my memory. You remember last August I had a birthday? I nodded. You did not send me a birthday card. I stared at him in horror, my mind racing around collecting the facts of the situation. No one had ever told me I needed to do that. Before my parents were divorced, my mother would get a card to go with my dad's birthday present and get us to sign it. It was just like she'd done for this Christmas. No one said there was a new rule. I had seen him a couple of times between August and Christmas, and my failure to give him a birthday card had never been mentioned. I was so ashamed I could hardly breathe. This is a lesson for all of you, he said, looking at Randy, Janet, and Virginia, who were as silent as mice. I am the eldest, I thought, so I am mostly to blame. But they are being forced to witness this to show them what could happen to them in the future. He was also saying that all of us had failed him. but I was the first. I should have known and shown more responsibility. I have the present in the car. I will give it to you later. I stared down at the ground, eating humiliation in heaping spoonfuls. Louise and I talked about it, and she felt you needed a lesson so you would take more responsibility. Let's have dinner, and I will get the present later. That moment, I realized not only had he initiated this horrible, shameful moment, but now he was not going to take responsibility for it. He was using Louise to avoid full responsibility for himself. I could feel my shame turning to anger. This is not fair. How could he expect me to know there were new rules in place? Why would he try to shame me in front of everyone, even my grandparents? And now he is not going to take responsibility for it? He did it. It's his mess. I took a big breath and looked up at him, dry-eyed and with a square jaw, summoning the courage to write out the rest of the day I would have to spend with him and that woman, Louise. My grandparents looked shaken. They would never have scolded or punished a child in the middle of a Christmas celebration, especially for something that happened months before and had never been mentioned since. Grandma got up and smoothed down her apron, moving to the kitchen to begin to get things on the table. "I'll help Grandma," I said. Nothing more was said about the birthday card incident as we ate the food Grandma had prepared. When we were done, I went into the spare bedroom, shutting the door behind me. I sat down on the bed, taking deeper breaths and trying not to cry, as anger and frustration ricocheted back and forth within my brain case. I'm not a bad person, I thought. I try to do the right thing. If I had known, I would have gotten the card. Why is he doing this to me? He did not bring me up to treat Christmas this way. Why is he doing it now? Christmas is supposed to be a time of caring and forgiving, not punishment and revenge. The last time I had been in this bedroom was when I'd heard my grandfather in the other room say those horrible words. Well, this is what you get when you let your wife run around with niggers. Suddenly, my grandfather's actions didn't bother me nearly as much as my father's did. What my grandfather said was just his weird opinion based on something I couldn't understand about his past. My father, however, was punishing me without any faith or understanding of who I was or what the notion of Christmas was all about. A little later, there was a light knock on the door. "Yes." "Judy, it's me," called Dad as he slowly pushed open the door. He came in holding a soft package in his hand. "Here is your present." I nodded, took it, and put it down. "Thank you," I said softly. He stood above me, and I thought, "Please don't touch me. Do not sit down. Do not cry. Just get out of here." My mother never cried, but my father did, and for some reason I knew this was the kind of moment when he might start to cry. He looked down at me with sad eyes, and I realized he was hoping I would forgive him by apologizing to him, crying myself, or reaching out my hands to be held. He will not get that from me, I said to myself, gritting my teeth with anger. I had the eerie feeling, not for the first time with my father, that our positions had shifted, and I had become the adult while he took the role of the child. However, I knew I was also expected to go on playing the child. I came out of the room and joined the rest of the group for the time we had left before heading back to Portland. Note to Evan. I can't help but ask, was there ever a time when you absolutely hated the person who was your parent and vowed you wouldn't bend to them? I know you couldn't have been more than 8 when your father died of tuberculosis. Did you remember anything of him? You never said a word about him except to say how he died. Your mother was in and out of the picture over the years. Were there times when you absolutely hated her? When she left you in California with your aunt, her twin? Hating your parent, absolutely hating them, isn't something most people want to talk about. I didn't want to talk about the times when I hated my father, but typical of me, I still took the blame for it, feeling the shame was mine because he behaved towards me this way. You kept such a guarded exterior. I wouldn't have known if shame wrapped you in knots this way. When I got home, I went directly up to my bedroom, throwing the package on the bed before I decided to go ahead and open it. I tore the paper and the tape away to reveal a soft knit dress with horizontal stripes, a style that was extremely popular right then. I decided I could wear it despite my anger about the incident at my grandparents' house. After all, where else would I get a dress in a new style like this? However, I did not intend to forgive my father. I knew my mother would never have done anything like this to me. I wondered if Mr. Porter would have, and I kind of doubted it. This was not black or white. It was just mean. In addition to what this incident taught me about my father, it also taught me never to let my guard down around Louise. From that day forward, I was always prepared for unexpected hurt when she was involved. Thank you to Westford Community Access Television for providing facilities and production support, all of which made this podcast possible.